Welcome back to the Commission Impossible podcast. Going to do things a little different on this episode. This is going to be a solo episode. That's just me talking to you. If you're watching on YouTube, hi, there's going to be some visual aids here. If you're listening on your podcast player or wherever you get your podcasts, I will do my best to describe what I'm describing. I have a sponsor for today. The Commission Impossible podcast is sponsored by Elite Real Estate Negotiation. It's me. I'm my own sponsor. Elite Real Estate Negotiation is a course that I created on the School platform, which is really cool. SKOOL. And the reason I created this course is because 17 years of selling cars and then 7 years plus selling houses. I feel like I have a lot of tricks up my sleeve, and I've got a few good chops, and I wanted to share them, and I wanted to make them available to serious professionals. I don't want to give it away. And what really inspired me, I had the idea in my head for a while, but what really inspired me was the NAR. That's the National Association of Realtors, which I'm not a member of. It's an American organization. They offer a series of different designations. So you can get the RENE designation, which is the Real Estate Negotiation Expert. And I was bored this summer. Business was slow for me, and I thought, well, maybe I'll become a real estate negotiation expert. And so I signed up and I paid the fee, which is a lot, and took this 2-day course. And I didn't learn anything. And what they want you to do is pay for the course, which I'll be honest is a joke. There was absolutely nothing tactical in there, nothing you could use. Really, the scenarios that they provided were how to talk your own client into something that they didn't really want. Not what I was hoping for at all. Total waste of money. And then they want to charge you again to join the NAR to get your designation. So you can put that in your bio. You can put certified real estate negotiation expert. If you ever see a realtor with that in their bio, it doesn't mean anything. And you know what? If you are a realtor and you're using that, that's fine. But I'm laughing at you. Sorry. So after that, I thought, okay, I have way more to offer here. I'm going to start putting my ideas down. I started writing them down and I started recording them. And pretty soon I've recorded over 50 videos, little lessons, and I broke them up in my classroom. There's theory, which explains the theory behind stuff. We'll talk a little bit about that today. And there's practice, which is very hands-on, tactical stuff, like what to say, what to do in very specific situations. And then there's a bonus section where I just give some bonus content. For example, I give you my whole listing presentation process, which works for me pretty much every time. And it's all mine. It's all my original ideas. It's stuff that I've learned over the years, selling cars and managing car salespeople and doing real estate and reading books. So you can find my classroom on the School platform. Do you have a pen handy? I'll wait. You're going to want to write this down. Just think of how good you're going to feel once you've joined this course and learned all these strategies. You're going to feel so much more confident and capable in your next negotiation. This is specifically for real estate agents, but if you work in other types of sales, you might find it useful as well. And it's only $97. So that's a lifetime one-time payment. And like I say, I've got over 50 videos there, and I'm creating more all the time. So you got that pen handy? Okay, you're writing this down. SKOOL.com/elite-real-estate-negotiation-8672. That is the URL, and you can join. And if you didn't catch all that, you can contact me or comment or whatever, and I'll get you a link to that. Take a look. It's worth the price 100 times over. I've sent this to a few experienced professionals that have been doing this longer than me, and they're like, wow, I'm gonna use this right away. That's what I want it to be. I want it to be tactical and real and practical and something I can go out and use today to win my next negotiation, which is going to make you a better agent, which is going to make the experience better for your client, which is going to make your client send you referrals, which is how I've built my business. So there you go. I hope you didn't fast forward through the sponsorship section, which I usually do when I listen to podcasts. Anyways, I want to thank my friend Yvette, my beautiful Filipina friend in Winnipeg, for the idea, because she found my podcast and she listened to all 12 episodes, and she just wanted to call me to tell me how much she loved it, which was such a compliment. She's an exceptional person and a really great agent. I've learned a lot from her. And she said, well, why don't you, in all these episodes, you're always talking about these books. You're always referring to these books. Why don't you do an episode highlighting your top 5 sales books? And I love this idea. So I've been preparing this. I've been working on this. she was listening to the episode with Ty, who's also, who's her colleague in Winnipeg, and she laughed at when Ty I mentioned a book to him, and he said, I don't really read books. He kind of confessed on that, which was bold of him to confess. But you know what? A lot of people don't. Most people don't. I never did either. Well, I mean, I read fantasy books and Ayn Rand and, certain fiction that I like and stuff. But I never really liked self-help or self-improvement or business or sales type books until I read this one book. And this is not one of my top 5 sales books, but I'm going to do this honorable mention. I'm going to do it first. I'm going to hold this book up. Can you see it? If you're listening and you're not watching, I'm holding up an orange and white paperback book, and it is called How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big. Kind of the Story of My Life by Scott Adams. If you recognize that name, Scott Adams is the creator of Dilbert Comics. I started listening to Scott's live stream, which sort of became a daily podcast live stream. He started off doing Periscope on Twitter, now known as X, and it just got so popular. It went from a couple hundred people listening to thousands and thousands to hundreds of thousands of people tuning in daily. And Scott would give his sort of take on the news, but he did it through what he referred to as the persuasion filter. So he's kind of a persuasion nerd. He loves the science of persuasion, and he would always say that to view life, to view the news, current events, communications, and people through this filter of what's persuasive and what's not has informed his decision making and informed his predictions. He became sort of a famous pundit by accident when he predicted back in 2015 during the primaries that Donald Trump would not only win the Republican nomination, but that he would go on and win the White House. And everyone laughed at him, and he got called on to talk shows and news shows and thoroughly mocked. And he was dead right, and he was right for the right reasons. Anyways, it's not about that. But anyways, he had recommended this book, and I thought I'll give it a go. And this book, again, coming from someone who never was really a self-help guy, I like to do things my own way. I consider myself kind of an original, but this was how do I put it? It was a revelation it was just the way that he frames things, and it changed the way I think. And it was also sort of reassuring or affirming in a way, because one of the early things he says in here is to forget about goals. And he says famously, goals are for losers. And he says that he has his philosophy that systems are better than goals. And rather than create goals which just you end up not hitting. And if you're listening and you're a big goal setter and you've got a program that works for you, I respect that. I admire that. I've just never been wired that way. And so for me to read that from this successful person was like, thank you for saying that. That is exactly how I feel about this. But that's just the taste of it. So if you're not a book guy, if you're Ty, if you're listening to this, start here, okay? How to Fail at Everything and Still Win Big. And this is the one book that I have bought multiple copies of, and I give them out. And maybe if you're a book person, you have a book like that just changed you so much or helped you so much that you want as many people that you care about as possible to read it. But here he has a sort of a summary at the beginning. He says the book tease: 1, goals are for losers. 2, your mind isn't magic. It is a moist computer that you can program. 3, the most important metric to track is your personal energy. 4, every skill you acquire doubles your odds of success. 5, happiness is health plus freedom. 6, luck can be managed, sort of. 7, conquer shyness by being a huge phony in a good way. I want to expand on that. I'll come back to that. Number 8, fitness is the lever that moves the world. Number 9, simplicity transforms ordinary into amazing. So for me, reading this book, being probably have ADHD and not an organized person and not a goal setter, this just was so affirming and so helpful to think of things in these ways and know that it works and there's just something that could work for me. That number 7, conquer shyness by being a huge phony. Well, I'm sort of like a introverted extrovert. Is that a thing? I forget how that goes, but naturally I'm an introvert, but I can speak in public and I can do this. I can record myself live on video and stuff, but it doesn't come naturally. The speaking in public is not a huge thing, but the thing he says about faking it, he does talk about imposter syndrome. And this is something that I've struggled with. I think a lot of people struggle with. I hear this all the time, especially when I was having some success in sales and in real estate, going and deep down having this this sick feeling like I don't really deserve this. I kind of fluked into this. I'm not really good at this. I had that for years in the car business until, I don't know, it was only in my last couple of years in it that I went, I'm pretty fucking good at this. And that's what it took for me to quit that job and get my real estate license, was the realization that, I'm actually pretty good at this. But what Scott says is there's a cure for imposter syndrome. And if you have imposter syndrome, which is to say that you feel maybe you're not worthy of your accomplishments or you're not worthy of your position, the cure to that is the knowledge that everybody else is faking it too. And we're all just trying to figure it out. And it's not just you. So that was really helpful too. Anyways, this is not one of my top 5 sales books I'm going to feature today, but it is an honorable mention because this got me started on the path of thinking about persuasion and thinking about how to learn some persuasion skills. And Scott always talks about a handful of books and a handful of persuaders that he follows. Then he encourages his listeners to pay attention to the techniques being used. And that includes President Trump. And he identified techniques and it's just like this mind-blowing thing. You're like, oh, that's what he's doing. Anyways, if you're not a book guy, start there. You can end the episode right now. Listen to it later after you've read that. Trust me, go get yourself a copy. Order it on Amazon. Get a couple copies because you're going to want to give them to your friends. Start there. Anyways, I'm going to share my 5 favorite sales books. And you're going to notice a theme, and they'll progressively get deeper into this theme as we go from 1 to 5. The last one, number 5, I almost didn't want to share. I didn't want to include this. I don't want to tell anyone about this book because I want it to be mine. It is, I just gushed about Scott Adams' book. This is along those same lines, but at a different level. And I'll get to that. You're going to have to listen to this whole thing to get to number 5. I didn't want to share it because I want to keep it to myself. I don't want everyone to read this book. I don't want everyone to have this book. And I don't want everyone using the techniques in there. I want to save it to myself because I don't want to lose my edge. You know what I mean? But if you listen to this podcast, I think you can appreciate it. This is very niche, and it's a niche book, and I feel comfortable sharing with you. I think it's the right thing to do. And I think it's the right thing to do for the author, too, because I love the book so much, I want the author to sell lots of them. Anyways, hang on to the end for that. I don't know how long this is going to take because without a guest, I'm in danger of rambling on here. So this could be my longest episode yet. We'll see. Okay. The first book I'm going to show you, I'm going to hold this up. And if you're listening only on audio, I am holding up a little black paper book with white title. And the book is called Exactly What to Say. And there was a guy named Phil Jones wrote the original Exactly What to Say. And it's kind of a field guide. It's kind of a tactical manual. And it's exactly how it sounds. It's sort of word tracks that you will use to overcome objections. Now, the version that I have, that I'm holding here, this is a later version where a couple of guys named Jimmy Mackin and Chris Smith, who are big sales influencers, and they were real estate agents. Chris Smith, great follow on Twitter and on Instagram. Jimmy Mackin, created Curator. Subscribe to their newsletters. These guys are killers. They're awesome. So they approached Phil Jones, the author of Exactly What to Say, and said, hey, can we collaborate with you and just make a version of this for real estate agents? So that's the version I have, but they're the same principles. What they've done is they've just taken those principles and applied them specifically to real estate situations. But this is, the course that I made is sort of along these lines. A little bit more tactical, a little bit more maybe sophisticated, I dare say, but also informed by books like this. And it's just some powerful, persuasive words. And this is kind of the cool thing about these 5 books I'm going to share with you. Once we get to the 5th book, that special one, it kind of comes back to this one, and I'll explain that. I'll explain that later. But what they've done here is they've taken very sophisticated influence and persuasion techniques, and rather than teach you the theory and the psychology of all that, because that's boring to most people, they just literally just tell you what to say. Load your lips, we used to call it in the car business. So it talks about magic words, right? Sales is, no matter what you're selling, it's about asking somebody for something. And this book tells you how to ask, and it tells you how to handle objections. So if you're not in real estate, don't get the real estate one, but look for Exactly What to Say. What they do is it's so simple. You can pick it up, flip it open to any section, and there's something you can go out and use right now. What it does is it'll give sort of the magic phrase and then a simple explanation of how and why that phrase works and how and why it's important, because they'll sort of reframe your thinking on these conversations, get you thinking persuasively, and they'll inspire you to improve your wording and your language. Once you start using this stuff, you'll start incorporating this language into your own communications, into your emails, into your marketing, to make it more effective. I have. So, I'll throw out an example. Okay, so here, I just opened this randomly. Okay, what is your experience? Those are magic words. What is your experience? All too often, you can find yourself in a conversation where you are being asked questions about yourself, your service, and your pricing, all without the context of understanding where the other person is coming from. Okay. Earlier, you learned that it is the person who is asking the questions that is in control of the conversation. It can, however, be all too easy to find yourself on the back foot with an unqualified interrogation, forcing you to embarrassingly justify your existence. You've been there. You've been there as a salesperson, right? They start grilling you, and that takes control away from you, right? It takes you off your game and out of your pitch. So you can manage the circumstance proactively by simply meeting the other person exactly where they are and anchoring your discussion based on their level of experience. Instead of I'm reading this out loud. If you're watching, you can see I'm doing that. Instead of being challenged by questions like, how much is your commission? What is my house worth? Will I get approved? And you can imagine different versions for different industries, but you've got these type of questions. You can lead a conversation skillfully by asking a question that creates a frame for their opinion to be encased in and reaffirms your expertise in the conversation. You do this by prefacing your question with the words, what is your experience? And this leaves them obligated to share any historic references they are basing their question on. What is your experience with selling houses? What is your experience with buying a new home? What is your experience with applying for a mortgage? What is your experience with working with a realtor? What is your experience timing the market? So all these people that when they start really challenging you and they know better than you, what is your experience? So it goes on. Calmly and kindly asking questions like this immediately reverses the control of the conversation and helps you discover where they are coming from. It's possible that you uncover a distinct lack of experience that translates into a fear or anxiety in them. It is at this point that you get the opportunity to help reassure them that this is exactly what you are there to help them with. You are looking for them to literally value your experience. So it's just a reframing, and it's subtle and it's non-confrontational. You're not outright challenging them. Hey, look, I've been doing this for X number of years, or, I've sold thousands of cars, or I've sold hundreds of houses or whatever. But you just ask a pretty harmless question. What is your experience? So I love that. Now, my second book, and I've talked about this book. I'm holding up a book now. If you're not watching on YouTube, and it is a yellow and blue cover, and it says Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion by Robert B. Cialdini, PhD. This is the new and expanded edition. So I've talked way too much about this book. This is kind of the Bible for persuasion techniques. So this book was written in 1984, the original one. This is the new and expanded edition. But 1984, Dr. Cialdini, he's a professor at Arizona State, professor of psychology, and he found that he was a bit of an easy mark for salespeople. He wanted to understand the psychology of that, of what works. And so he did this study with his students in the lab, but also he did field work where he secretly signed up for sales training courses and went and worked at sales jobs and went through their training to try to understand what techniques they were using and why they worked and how they worked, and really get into the psychology of it. And so 1984, he condensed all of his work down to identify 6 what he called weapons of influence. I've given presentations about this. I've talked about this book. I tell everybody about this book. But, if you're not the reading type, you start with Scott Adams. And Scott Adams would always tell people about this book and tell people about Cialdini. But then get yourself a copy of this. Keep it handy and understand these 6 weapons. Now, it's 40 years old, but they all still apply today. In this new expanded edition, he went back and he added a 7th weapon of influence. As a salesperson, you want to understand these. I'm going to summarize them briefly. I don't want to get too deep into it. It would take all night. That could be a whole other episode, and you'll just change the channel. You'll get bored. But it's worth reading. Again, once you understand these things, you start to incorporate these weapons or incorporate these principles into your communications. And so here's what they are. Number 1, reciprocation. So that is the idea that if you give somebody something, they subconsciously feel like they owe you and they want to give something back. I'll give you an example in my business. When I go on a listing meeting, I give the clients, it's usually a couple, I give them each one my branded Yeti mugs. I wish I'd had some in my office here to show you. Those cost me $54 a piece. But I start with that, right? I give them these when you give somebody something, they feel like they owe you back. And often you will get something of much greater value back. And they don't know they don't consciously feel like they owe you, but subconsciously they do. So, in my case, they feel like they should probably work with me. Now, if I didn't make a good presentation and convince them otherwise, the mugs wouldn't matter, but that's my example. Number 2 is liking. So people will deal with somebody that you like. If you can get somebody to like you, they're more likely to say yes to you. So you could get better at that. If what's the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People? That's all about liking. Dale Carnegie, right? That's not one of my 5 books. A million other people have recommended that, but getting people to like you makes your persuasion more effective. Social proof. So social proof is, say you're the solar salesman. You're selling solar panels for your roof. Well, hey, I've been working up and down your street, and the Joneses over there, and the Smiths, and the Andersons, they've all booked installations, and that's social proof. Other people are doing it, so it's safe for me to do it. I should do it too. Number 4 is authority. So when something comes from a place of authority, it has more weight. It's more persuasive. In the book, he refers to the Stanley Milgram experiments, which are kind of sadistic, but they proved a point that people will follow instructions from what they perceive as an authority figure. The 5th one, arguably the most powerful one, is scarcity. And when there are few of something, it makes you want it more. If you take something away from somebody, it makes them want it more. We saw scarcity in action during the housing boom when it was a crazy seller's market and you're getting multiple, several, sometimes dozens of offers on a single property. People are responding to scarcity, the fear of losing it. The fear of losing something is actually more powerful than the desire to get it. So he talks about that in the book. Number 6 is commitment and consistency. And that refers to the tendency of people to want to be consistent with you if they've committed to you. So he explains how to gain someone's commitment to engage their habit of consistency. And the 7th one that he added is unity. So if you can kind of give people the sensation that I'm with you, we're on the same team, we're in the same tribe, they are more persuadable. Now, what's interesting about this is Cialdini wrote this as kind of for people to defend themselves against people that wanted to talk them into something. He wrote it from his own perspective, feeling like someone who was kind of a sucker that could be talked into stuff, that always said yes. And he wrote it for people like him and how they would recognize these techniques being used on them and how they could protect themselves. But ironically, people that worked in sales and sales managers and that sort of thing, they're the ones who picked up this book and went, I want to learn more about these techniques because I want to get better at my job. And the rest is history. So, 41 years ago. Okay, the 3rd book. Now, I'm holding up an orange and yellow hardcover book, and it is Persuasion, a revolutionary way to influence and persuade. The author is Robert Cialdini, same guy. Okay, so this book came out in 2016, 32 years after he published Influence. So the book Influence became very famous, became very well known, and after 32 years, he reflected back on his research for Influence, and he recalled the very top performing salespeople, the absolute outliers, who somehow had this magical ability to completely outperform their peers. And he worked with them. He shadowed some of these people in his research. He got these jobs. He went on training and shadowed these people. He researched more deeply into what the subtle differences is, what made them so much better. And he explains it in this book. He thinks he identified it. So it digs a little bit deeper and explores not just what to say, but also when to say it. So his idea of persuasion is that top performing salespeople are priming their subject, their customer, whatever. They're priming them for a yes before they even answer a question. So they're sort of, I'll give you a clue to where this is going. They're sort of speaking to that person's subconscious brain to plant an idea in there, an inception, right? And prepare them for a yes. So it's the front loading of persuasion. It's the groundwork that makes the yes very easy to get. Now, in the opening of the book, he shares a story of shadowing this home security system salesman. And it's really cool. I don't know, should I bother sharing it now? Why not? You're not going anywhere, right? So he's working undercover with this home security company. They go door to door. They have a call center generating appointments, and they go door to door selling a home security system. And there's this one guy that closes all of his appointments, and nobody else is even close. And so he's trying to figure out what makes this guy different. And he goes out on a sales call with him, just as a apprentice or whatever, just to sit and observe and listen. And this guy's going into people's homes, and they have their standard kit. They have their standard presentation book and materials that they lay out, and their standard pitch that they're trained. Very, very typical pitch. This is, it had a quiz that you take people through to test their knowledge of home security. And then, it highlighted the gaps in their knowledge, what they might need and versus what they understood and, presented their product versus competing product, blah, blah, blah. Pretty standard pitch. And he's trying to figure out how is this guy selling so much more of these than everyone else? And he's in his first meeting with him. And the guy said, the sales guy says to the family that he's with, he puts out this test in front of him. He goes, I forgot some important materials in my car. Do you mind if I just run out and get them? And I can let myself back in. And people would give them, oh, yeah, no problem. And give them the house keys so he could go out to his car and let them back in. And he just thought that was kind of peculiar. And he went out on he's still trying to figure out why is this guy's presentation so much more effective? Because he used the same materials. He said the same lines. And he went out on 2 more sales calls. And this guy, at the exact same time as before, pulled that exact same move, said, hey, I forgot some important materials in my car. Do you mind if I just run out and get them? I'll let myself back in. And so he's pressing this guy on the car ride back. He's saying, what is it that you're doing different? Why are you so much better? And the guy didn't really want to tell him. And finally he gives in, he says, what's the thing with going to your car? Why do you do that every time? The guy didn't want to give up his secret. And he says, well, when I do that, they give me the keys to their house. And who do you give the keys to your house to? It has to be someone that you trust. They're trusting me to leave with their house keys and come back. And he says, and who do people want to buy from? Someone that they trust. So that was like a, eureka moment for him that kind of inspired this book. So he's got a whole chapter in there also about the ethics of persuasion and the effects of abusing it and taking it too far. And the cool thing about that is it's not a lecture in morality about, using the force and going to the dark side or whatever, but he actually makes a financial case on why, reputational damage from using unethical techniques will ultimately hurt your business and profit. So I'm glad he covers that too. And, though the book I'm holding up here, it's kind of a big, heavy tome. It looks like a beast, but it includes 200 pages of references and notes. It's a science book, right? It's written in plain language. It's written for any asshole like me to read it and understand it. But he is a psychologist and it is a science book. So he sought to understand the psychology of persuasion. So that's the third book. In reading the next 2 books, and then I'm going to circle back to the first one, it seems to me that Cialdini, through these 2 books, and he's written others too, he may have inadvertently stumbled upon something else. And he's getting deep into the psychology of it. That's his field. But there's something he's starting to uncover there. And it got me curious, and I'm going to come back to that. So book 3, this is called Flipnosis, if you're listening. I'm holding up a black and red paperback. Kevin Dutton is the author. Flipnosis, The Art of Split-Second Persuasion. So this is kind of along the same lines. This book's a lot of fun. So Kevin Dutton, he's an English psychologist at Oxford, a pretty high-level academic. He's smart and he's funny. The book's fun. It's a science book too, but you're going to laugh out loud at times. You're going to have eureka moments at times and go, wow, why did I think of that? That's going to work so good. He swears a lot. There's a lot of colorful language in it. It's a lot of fun. I enjoyed reading it, but it's brilliant. Like it will sort of reframe the way you think about stuff. And he's friends with Bob Cialdini, and he consulted him for a lot of this too. And a lot of Cialdini's work sort of informed his work here. So in his research, he kind of along those persuasion lines, like that priming people, and this is about like a split-second persuasion as he describes it. And he discovered something that it's extremely subtle and extremely effective. It only takes seconds. And he wanted to figure out the formula for this. So he came up with a formula. He came up with an acronym. So what he calls his 5 major axes of persuasion. So the acronym is SPICE, SPICE, which stands for simplicity. And what he means by that is only essential communication is included in the message. No fluff, just what you need. The P is for perceived self-interest, and that is the need to appeal to the other person's self-interest or perceived self-interest. The I is for incongruity. There's some great stories around that. What that refers to is sort of doing or saying the unexpected, which sort of gets you access to somebody's subconscious mind. It kind of knocks them off track. He gives good examples of that. The C is for confidence, which sort of gives off a halo effect. Like you've heard of the confidence con, like somebody who delivers a message confidently is more persuasive. And then the E is for empathy. And you know what empathy is, but he's talking about, sort of finding the other person's frequency and meeting them at that level and communicating that way. It takes a strange turn at the end because throughout his research, he identified the most influential and persuasive type of person possible. And that person is called a psychopath. So he interviewed a few of them. He started to realize, like, and he explains what a psychopath is. And it doesn't necessarily have to mean a serial murderer or rapist. He said, it could be a war hero. It could be a sports superstar, could technically meet the criteria of psychopath. But the psychopath is the most influential, most persuasive type of person. So he describes what makes them what they are. And it's not a lack of empathy that makes a psychopath, but it's actually a very heightened empathy, only it's a different kind of empathy. He refers to hot empathy and cold empathy. So hot empathy referring to what you feel when you physically feel have an effect on you from what another person is feeling. That is a hot empathy. That's kind of the empathy that you're probably familiar with. But what psychopaths have is a cold empathy, which is very heightened, but it's a cold and calculated version. It's not a feeling, it's an understanding of how to tap into someone else's feelings. So maybe you know a psychopath. Maybe you are one. Hope not. But if you are a psychopath and you're in sales, you're probably killing it. That's a bad pun. In the book, he concludes by conceding that not everyone is capable of this type of lightning quick influence. Some are just born with it. And the examples he gives early on, they're kind of like a quick wit, like a really fast wit. He refers to Winston Churchill and has some stories about him. He refers to, this is kind of along the lines of incongruity, he refers to a airline stewardess who had Muhammad Ali on her plane. And she's going through before takeoff doing the checks and saying, okay, you need to fasten your seatbelt. And Ali says to her, I'm Superman. Superman doesn't need a seatbelt. And immediately she goes, Superman doesn't need an airplane. So some people just have that, right? Anyways, we're going to get, I'm on to the last book. And I teased you about this, and how far are we in here? Well, we've got through this in a pretty reasonable amount of time. This book, like I said, I didn't want to include it. I thought about not including it, and then I thought, I kind of have to. If I'm being honest, my top 5 sales books, this is number 1. Now, books 2, 3, and 4, so if you recall, Influence, Persuasion, and Flipnosis, they get really close to this, but they don't quite get there. Now book 1 gets it, but doesn't name it for what it is. And what I'm talking about is hypnosis. In this book, I'm holding up, if you're listening and not watching, the book is called This Feels Like Cheating. And there's a picture, it's a little white paperback. There's a picture of a brain, a little brain cartoon guy, and he's got a ace of hearts tucked into his brain. And the subtitle is Master Hypnotic Persuasion, Hack Your Own Mind, and Reprogram Your Reality. The author is, in quotation marks, Dr. Hypnosis, not a real person. Well, not his real name. Certainly a real person. Now, you probably won't find this book if you made it to the end of this episode and you just had to know what this book is. The next step will be trying to buy yourself a copy. Good luck with that. It's not sold on any of the major booksellers. I'm not going to give it away and tell you where you have to go to buy this book. I'll let you figure it out. If you're serious about it, you'll find it. Anyways, the author doesn't reveal his name, just Dr. Hypnosis. And I think probably because the people in this trade don't want their secrets given away. But this is about hypnosis. And what's interesting is Cialdini was getting onto this as he got into persuasion and speaking to somebody's subconscious brain, which is what hypnosis is. So I'm not a hypnotist. I'm fascinated by it, and I'm learning about it and reading about it, and I want to get certified in it. But the idea of it, and once you begin to understand it, it will change the way you think. It will change the way you understand people. It'll change the way you understand how people perceive things and how communication works and how emotions work. It's a certain truth that is very obvious to hypnotists and will seem counterintuitive to everyone else, but it's very much true. So there are 30 chapters in here. It will sort of give you a basic introduction and kind of act as a field guide for hypnosis. So it's not going to teach you to be a hypnotist, but it's going to teach you how to use some of these techniques mainly on yourself. You're going to learn about trance and inducing a trance, brain waves, and great ways to hack your brain and get a better understanding on how people think and react and how people make decisions. It is a game changer. Your mind will be blown. Mine is. And I'm going to make a habit of kind of rereading and referring to this book a few times a year. I'm going to share one chapter with you. There's 30 short chapters. It's very easy to read. It's not like a textbook, but he wrote this book because nothing else like this really existed, and something that explains how this works and gives you a few basics on it. There are books about hypnosis, but not like this. So, Chapter 5, Wordplay Wizardry, Commanding Without Demanding. And he says, meet the Milton model. In the NLP field, that's neuro-linguistic programming, it refers to Milton Erickson, perhaps the most influential hypnotherapist in living memory, and his methods for inducing hypnotic trance. This model leverages the power of words and suggestion. The way things are phrased, patterns of language, to use Cialdini's phrase, trigger click, run, default responses in the human brain. The Milton model uses different types of patterns, such as tag questions, double binds, and what we're really interested in, embedded commands. Tag questions are primed to persuade because you're suggesting agreement within the question. Remember, we are always aiming to circumvent the listener's critical thinking mechanisms and speak more directly to the part of their brain that processes feelings and emotions. That's where the decisions are made. Here's some examples of the tag question pattern. It feels good to relax and let go of your stress, doesn't it? You'd like to make some progress today. Isn't that right? You can see how much this is helping, can't you? Direct statements run the risk of alerting logic brain, extending an invitation. Think about this statement, evaluate it, decide if it's true. A simple question stapled to the end invites agreement and nudges the listener ever so slightly towards compliance. Just compare these two sentences and see if you notice a difference in how each one makes you feel. This lasagna is delicious, or this lasagna is delicious, isn't it? I'm not going to read the whole chapter, but let me cover this on embedded commands, because I do use these in my emails and stuff. When we get into embedded commands, things get even more interested, don't they? With this pattern, many hypnotists can sneak a command past your conscious mind, and you will absorb it subconsciously. I just used the pattern in that last sentence. Perhaps you noticed. So I'm going to say it again. With this pattern, many hypnotists can sneak a command past your conscious mind, and you will absorb it subconsciously. So at the end, you will absorb it subconsciously. Anyways, that's all I'm going to give you. I challenge you to go find this book, get yourself a copy. I'd love to hear what you think of it. And that concludes this solo episode, my 5 favorite sales books. So that one was for you, Yvette. I know you're probably going to listen to this. And for everyone else, thanks for listening, and make sure you subscribe it and share with all your friends who might find this as interesting as you did.